Hey guys, Pedro here to do an album review, and today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Wada, Crepuscule Natura, out September 8th on Eisenwall. This album has 5 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 4th full-length studio album. They are an American black metal band. From a design point of view, when you look at a record with 5 tracks, it may feel simple to put them together and create a fun structure. I think it's the other way around. The less tracks you have, sometimes the more difficult things become. But they did a wonderful job creating an album that has individual journeys, individual paths with each and every single song, and then pushing the listener to take experiences from each of those journeys, each of those paths, and building upon and creating their own path as you navigate through this entire record from beginning to end. This makes the process more enjoyable, and it gives incredible playability to the overall record. As far as the sound is concerned, this album connects with the past of the band, connects with their origins extremely well. I don't feel like they're reinventing the wheel here. They're just going back, taking something that was always there, always part of their DNA, and bringing all the learning experiences that they've had from other records, from playing live, from being on the road, and creating perhaps what their debut album could have sounded like if they had the maturity that they have today. That's kind of how this album feels to me from a soundscape point of view. But it's an album that has in its sound a lot of different pillars, and those pillars have end results in terms of what they offer. You have, for example, the heavier side of the band, the more black metal side of the band, if you will, that offers aggression, intensity, really dense. There are some songs on this album where the guitar sound is extremely dense, even fuzzy. And that adds a different texture, not just to the track, but to the atmosphere that that sound creates. Then you have the more melodic side, another important pillar of this album. And on the melodic side, you have some black and roll elements that create a more bright atmosphere, a more bright sound, that loosen up the record a little bit, that cut into that thicker side of the album, allowing the overall experience to become one that's easier to digest, because now the album is a lot more textured, not necessarily layered, but definitely has different textures as you progress. And then there's also some melody on this album that creates a lot of melancholy. So the atmosphere of this record is not constant. It's not the same atmosphere with every single song. It's not the same vibe with every single song. It's actually not even the same atmosphere or vibe within the same track. It's constantly changing because it's dependent on what's creating it, and what's creating it is a very versatile approach that's always moving, that's always changing, following patterns, yes, but not necessarily using a one-size-fits-all approach within the songs and from song to song. Overall, you see the versatility of this record perhaps a little bit better on the guitar sound, because when you look at the melody, when you look at what the melody is doing, creating those two different perspectives, that more black rock and roll feel that some of the tracks have, or that more traditional black metal sound, all of that is really defined by the guitars first and foremost. It's a very guitar focused, it's a very guitar centric record, and you're always able to see where the songs are going because of how the guitars are coming forward. The duality in having some thicker guitar sound behind some melodic guitar sound really creates an interesting element. It creates a nice texture in the overall sound experience that makes the album feel a lot richer. It also allows the album to breathe a lot better. This is an album that, for all that it offers, for all the sound that it gives, it's so easy to listen to. I think it's one of their easiest albums to listen to navigate through, to enjoy, to appreciate, and to really break it down. It becomes a lot better from that perspective because you don't feel burdened by the experience at the end of the record. You still feel rejuvenated. You feel like you're ready to go back for more. And the guitar sound, the duality within the guitars, the versatility within the guitars, and always carrying that melody with the heaviness, sometimes without the heaviness, but with the heaviness, really allows the album to never really become overly compact and overly dense. Now, the drums have more of a unifying sound. A lot of the heaviness, a lot of the thickness comes also with the drums, compounding on what the guitars are doing. So the drums have a more linear role and linear output from beginning to end. There are moments where the drums obviously drop down, because the melody takes over, or there's a more melancholic piece that really doesn't need any sort of heaviness around it. And in those moments, the drums know when to stop, know when to slow down, and know when to get out of the way. But overall, when you look at the overall drum performance on this record, is one of consistency, not the same sort of versatility that you have in the guitar sound. But you can't have everything going all over the place, otherwise the album becomes extremely chaotic. And the drums are a little bit of the borders that control that versatility, that don't allow the chaos to over exaggerate itself in the overall experience of the sound. Now when it comes to the vocals are also very consistent in terms of the darkness, in terms of the heaviness, and they counterbalance really well the overall melody that exists in the tracks, because even when the guitars are being melodic or they have that black and roll feel to them, the vocals are still very dark, the vocals are still very cavernous. So having that element there also creates a more texture sound experience and allows the overall album to feel more balanced, even though there's ebbs and flows throughout each and every single song, and obviously from song to song. But it's an interesting way of creating a record that allows the vocals to be more of an instrument, and an instrument that impacts the sound and it impacts the atmosphere than just simple vocals. Also having them at times a little bit deeper in the mix, at other times a little bit more in the forefront, it creates movement without necessarily changing the approach, the tonality, or the delivery. It's just where you're putting them in the mix. You're forcing movement into an element that otherwise would be completely stagnant. This is also an important piece of this puzzle. Overall, when you look at all those pieces, you have to say that this is their best album to date. They took everything that's always been there, everything that was part of the band, the early goings of that raw energy, that hunger that they had when they released their debut album, without the knowledge, without the maturity that they have now. They were able to bring that past into this present, infuse it into a more well-oiled machine, and put out a record that has zero flaws from start to finish. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with The Abyss, Gazing Back. This is the opening track on the album, and it creates really interesting waves of sound. Melodic guitars staying more consistent from start to end. They do drop at times, but they're very consistent in their output. The drums offer a different level of heaviness to the track, creating, with the darker side of the guitar sound, with the more dense sound of the guitar sound, this really big experience, thick experience, dense experience, that then the melodic guitars kind of cut through and allow it to be a little bit better cooked. So it's easier for you to navigate through it, because even though the song at times feels thick and dense, you don't really stick too much in it, because the melody is easing that experience, is easing the sound as it travels through you. So it's a nice way of merging those two worlds in a single track, in a song that opens up the album, that has very dark and heavy vocals consistently from beginning to end, but it's definitely a song that's defined in its own experience. And when you open the album with this track, you're really letting the listener know how versatile the overall record is going to be, the dynamics of the record, because this song really encompasses a lot of the elements that this album is really built upon. Next we have Crepuscule Natura, definitely a more dense song. In this track, the melody of the track doesn't cut through the density as much as it did in The Abyss Gazing Back. In The Abyss Gazing Back, at times you feel like there's incredible pockets for you to kind of catch your breath and move forward. In this one, you don't have as much of that, so it feels like a more thicker experience, a more thicker song. It still has a melodic tone or undertone to it, but the denser guitar sound piggyback on the heavier drum sound really allow you to feel like this is a track that just doesn't have as many breaks, it just doesn't have as many pauses. It's all about the darkness, it's all about that experience, it's all about that sound, that big heavy sound, and that becomes more of the cornerstone of the track. And some of the melodic guitar sound is there not to thin out that experience, but just to kind of give you some spices so that the song doesn't feel completely stagnant, completely linear from beginning to end. That blackened rock and roll experience comes in at times, and that is enough to kind of feel like the track has some room to breathe. Now there is a pocket in this song that definitely gives you some room to breathe because of that black and rock and roll feel that comes in. Then it turns into a more melancholic melody, and then from that melancholic melody it goes into a guitar solo that's also very melodic in its own right. So that part of the track really creates a very haunting atmospheric experience, but it's not enough to take away from how dense the overall song was, at least up until that point, and even a little bit towards the end of it. Last but definitely not least, Through the Wax and Through the Vein. This is actually the last song on the record, and this is an epic track. 12 plus minutes, not because 12 plus minutes is an epic song, but that plays a role in the epicness of the track. If each song has its own path, if each song gets its own journey, this one is one of epic proportions. This is climbing Everest. That's how this track is put together. It's super dynamic, versatile, dynamic, diverse, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. It's a track that just moves in so many different ways, but it never brings you backwards. It's always taking you forward. It's just taking you forward in different directions and with different elements. I love how this track is put together because it really feels a closure to this record. It really feels like you're reaching the climax of the album. You're reaching the peak of Mount Everest, if you will. So it's a track that just allows you to, at times, look back at the previous 4 songs, see elements of those 4 songs represented in this track, see how those 4 songs brought you here, and how they gave you the necessary tools for you to be able to tackle this song in a different way, for you to be able to enjoy this song in a different way. The previous 4 tracks really prepare you for what this song is going to offer. From a soundscape point of view, from how dynamic it is, the sounds that it has, the atmosphere that it creates, the different atmospheres, the heavier side, the more melodic side, the dynamic between the two, how the vocals come in. I think this is the most textured song vocally in the entire record. There's no other song that matches this one in terms of what this song offers. The movement that the vocals have, while in the rest of the record they're a little bit more uniform, a little bit more compact in the delivery and in the outcome. In this song, the vocals feel as loose, with as much room to breathe as the song itself. So it's definitely an interesting song from this point of view because it sets itself apart from the rest of the album, but it's actually the logical next step after the previous 4 tracks. This is it. Wada with Crepuscule, Natura, out September 8th on Eisenwald. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.